They're doing it again. Release a jungler, make them a little weak, then buff them and make them OP. What's going on, summoners? Another patch rundown. You know the drill. My name is Irene, and I'm here with the 10.12 patch rundown for you guys. Like always, I'll be running you through all the changes that have hit Summoner's Rift on patch 10.12, as well as providing tier lists curated by our own in-house challenger analysts. This is going to be a long one, so let's get moving. First, I want to tell you guys that we have a Discord community as well as a subreddit we want you to be a part of. Check out the description for links to join either of those. Like I said, we want you to be a part of our family. Next, it also helps us a ton if you could answer our question of the day. Which champion voice line is your favorite in the game? Anytime I hear Vladimir say, "The clot thickens," I can't help but chuckle because of how dumb it is. It gives me a good laugh, but I want to know what you guys like hearing and why in the comments below. Now, let's get started with the video. Let's start by running through all the new skins. We've got new additions including High Noon Aurelia, High Noon Senna, and finally, Hextech Nocturne. However, like the rest of the Hextech skin line, you'll need to unlock this Nocturne skin through gemstones rather than RP. These High Noon skins look incredible. Definitely give them a look and drop some RP on them because, like always, they look great, guys. Now it's time to talk balance. There are an incredible number of systems changes this patch, so please do not overlook these guys. Let's talk about the Summoner's Rift changes first. Cloud Rift is the first change we need to talk about. Movement speed in wind areas when out of combat has been increased to 35%, and there are now 2 new locations for Scryer's Bloom. One will be outside of the base gates, while the other will be near the Tribe Rush. Whenever Summoner's Rift transformed into a Cloud Rift, it just didn't feel that impactful. Sure, we all get some extra movement speed in the jungle, but I really don't think anyone thought much of it. But now, we get even more movement speed. So now we've got something to work with, guys. The extra movement speed, as well as the extra vision control, should give players a much safer experience on Summoner's Rift when the Cloud Drake decides to pay a visit. Ultimately, this means that vision denial will be slightly less rewarding on this version of Summoner's Rift when those Scryer's Blooms are up. But don't let this dissuade you from denying enemy vision, however. Running through the jungle for rotations is much more rewarding than before, and some trigger-happy players are going to rush through the jungle much more often now. Good vision control will allow you to capitalize on this and find some picks on your opponents. Infernal Rift is the next version we need to talk about. This variation changes the terrain of Summoner's Rift, but it doesn't seem all too different from the Mountain Rift. Aside from the elemental buff that players would duke it out over, both of these rifts just change the layout of the map. To make it a clearer distinction between the two, a blast cone has been added near the Gromp camp as well as one outside of the base gates. This creates chaos and a whole new level of hectic gameplay. Blast cones, in spite of being a saving grace at times, can also be the reason why you end up dying. Sometimes an enemy pops you back to them, sometimes an ally does that by accident, or maybe on purpose. Hopefully you catch it all on tape so you can post some of those mishaps on Reddit for some free karma. Hint hint, we've got a subreddit you guys can join. Anyway, these blast plants create a whole new dynamic, especially in the mid to late game, where teams can blast plant over a wall for some courageous inhibitor turret dives. But when you're on the defensive side of things, teams will have to make sure they're breaking these plants to ensure that no surprises come their way. We've actually got summoner spell changes too. Don't ghost us, by the way. Please subscribe. I've left a lot of messages for you guys. Please. It'd mean a lot to us, and it'd also make it easier for us to continue providing you guys the same informative content that we're always bringing. Okay, yeah, the summoner spell we want to talk about, though, is Summoner Spell Ghost. We all know it as the Need for Speed summoner spell. The movement speed bonus is being decreased from 28 to 45% to now being 20 to 40%, but will no longer ramp up over 2 seconds. The moment you cast the spell, you receive the entire movement speed buff. In addition to this, the cooldown has been increased from 180 seconds to 210. But in return, you can extend the duration of your ghost by 4 to 7 seconds with each takedown. That's killer assist. These buffs are huge, and I expect players to start running it much more often than before. A ton of champions can abuse this summoner spell, so watch out for junglers, top lane juggernauts, and even mid lane control mages to start using it again. Next, we need to run through a bunch of runes as well. First up is Guardian. Guardian received a ton of quality of life buffs. Its range was increased from 175 to 350, and will only trigger upon an ally taking 75 to 200 damage within 2.5 seconds based on your level, or any damage that would be lethal. As a result, It won't randomly activate when your ally gets dinked by a flimsy auto attack from an enemy Janna. The shield was also buffed from 70 to 150 to now being 80 to 200, and the movement speed bonus was removed altogether. It's much more clear now what this keystone is trying to accomplish, and it should do a better job of it as well. Be the hero your allies need and give this rune a try after these changes. Another keystone that's received changes is Predator. The cooldown has been reduced from being 150 to 100 seconds to now being 100 down to 70 seconds, while the damage has been reduced from 60 to 180 plus 0.4 base AD and 0.25 AP to now being 30 to 90 plus 0.2 base AD and 0.1 AP. However, you can now cast Predator from the very beginning of the game. Also, the rune now channels instantly and only consumes the bonus damage charge when hitting an enemy champion. The bonus movement speed has been changed so that it ramps up over 1.5 seconds to 45% when moving towards enemy champions. The duration of the hunt has been reduced from 15 to 10 seconds, but while it deals less damage now, you can use Predator much more often than before. It's a mobility-focused keystone now, and a bunch of niche new builds will likely result from this. Unflinching is next. The rune was severely underused, and this buff should make it a popular one. Taking the rune now grants 10% tenacity and slow reduction, ramping up to 30% based on your missing health. You receive the maximum bonus at 30% health remaining. Champions that utilize the resolve tree are going to feel so much stronger now. The third tier of accessory runes, which includes Revitalize, Overgrowth, and Unflinching, always felt like it was focused solely on scaling. Unflinching is definitely the early to mid-game rune of choice there, and the resolve tree overall, which will be in a much stronger place with the change to this rune as well as Guardian. Next up is Taste of Blood. You now have an indicator telling you whether it is up or not, a nice quality of life change that I'm sure everybody can appreciate. Finally, Approach Velocity has received some changes as well. This rune was supposed to be an offensive and defensive rune, but basically no one used it defensively, and that's okay, because Riot has made changes now. Riot has decided they want to take out the movement speed when you're moving toward movement impaired allies, and instead focus exclusively on making Approach Velocity an offensive rune. You now gain 7.5% bonus movement speed when moving towards a movement speed impaired enemy champion, and this amount doubles if you're the one who applied that crowd control. This isn't really a nerf since most champions that ran this rune weren't even trying to save an ally. Champions who run it like Olaf or Dr. Mundo aren't running to save their teammates. They're running at the enemy backline to try and kill them. What this change does is it allows other champions, even those without crowd control, to use it. For example, if one team has a bot lane Ashe, any champion on that team can use Approach Velocity to at least gain the halved movement speed bonus when chasing whoever Ashe tags. 7.5% movement speed is still a sizable bonus, and this rune should definitely see some more usage overall, rather than remaining a niche rune. That covers the system changes, so let's now talk about the champion changes. Beginning with the top lane, we've actually got no balance changes for you guys. However, there have been some indirect buffs and balance changes to flex pick champions, which does mean that there'll be various shifts made to our tier list. First, let's talk about the changes that we've made. From the bottom up, we've moved Akali up to the C tier. We'll talk about her buffs in the mid lane section, but we all know that she sees play in the top lane as well. Akali is a champion who is extremely sensitive to even the smallest balance changes. With her Q, her main ability, receiving a buff, our analysts have given the green light to move her up a tier. The next champion we've moved up is Quinn to the A tier, and we've also bumped Singe up to the S tier. With Predator receiving some massive changes, our analysts expect it to become a more viable rune for not only junglers to run, but laners as well. Champions who excel at roaming like Singed and Quinn will absolutely love running this rune. Its cooldown is much shorter than before, meaning that they'll be able to do what they love, going to other lanes and killing their opponents. And outside of the laning phase, the added movement speed instead gives them more pick-making potential. It'll definitely feel much better to play these sorts of champions, and we also might see some juggernauts like Garen run it as well, but I'm not quite sure just yet. With that said, let's run through our S+ and S tier in the top lane. Our S+ tier for this patch is Darius, Fiora, Wukong, Maokai, and Garen. Like the previous patch, these champions are still killing it in the top lane and are showing no signs that they plan on leaving. Without any direct nerfs, there's just no way that these champions are going to fall out of the meta with how effective they are at stomping solo queue games. Right below that in our S tier, we have Mordekaiser, Shen, Kled, Jax, Urgot, Nasus, Tryndamere, and Singed. We've brought in Singed because of the amount of immense success he finds at all ranks. Perhaps part of it is due to his low play rate. Players aren't used to playing against him, so they perform worse against him. In spite of this, he sees enough play when accounting for all ranks to say that he's at least an above average pick. But with the addition of these Predator changes, our analysts firmly believe that he'll begin to shine as a pick that more players become comfortable relying on to carry games through immense map pressure. That covers the top lane, so now let's delve into the jungle next. There are quite a few changes we have to go over, so let's start with Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks got nerfed. His W's damage to minions has gone down from 60% to 50%. Right after buffing him, Riot has decided to once again hit Fiddlesticks with a nerf. While he'll need some more of those to become balanced, a nerf is still a nerf. Fiddle's wave clear was a random strength that he just didn't need. He already has power in plenty of other places, and the extra wave clear was just over the top. Riot has decided to leave Fiddlestick's damage output untouched, but with slightly weaker wave clear than before. He's still going to be S+ tier, so absolutely abuse him while you can. I can smell more nerfs coming his way soon. Next in the jungle, Trundle also got nerfed. His W's movement speed bonus has been changed from 30 to 50% to 20 to 52%. When the ability is maxed, it now grants 2% movement speed, but this comes at a great cost. When the ability is level 1 instead, he's lost 10% bonus movement speed. It's going to be a lot harder for Trundle to chase down his foes now. Trundle's greatest strength is his damage. With it, he's also able to keep a bunch of different champions in check because they won't be able to fight him head to head. Although it'll be harder for him to catch his opponents, he still doesn't really lose many fights when he gets them. Our analysts believe that Trundle will remain an S tier pick because he's still the best anti-tank jungler in the game. Bolabear received a hotfix buff last patch. His Q's movement speed went up from 10 to 30% to now being 15 to 35%, while his E's bonus damage went up from 60 to 180 plus 7 to 13% of an enemy's maximum health to now being 80 to 200 plus 11 to 15% of an enemy's maximum health. The non-champion damage cap has also been increased by 50 at all ranks. On top of this, he's received buffs this patch. His mana per level has been increased from 40 to 50, and his health per level has been increased from 85 to 90. Volibear's Q has also received some nice quality of life changes. His Q's empowered attack can no longer be interrupted once it's been initiated, and its timing also scales with Volibear's attack speed. Volibear's ultimate's turret disable duration has also been changed from 2, 4, 6 seconds based on rank to 3, 4, 5 seconds, meaning that it will be stronger in the early game and weaker in the late game. And finally, the damage on his ultimate was also increased early on and now deals 300, 500, 700 damage instead of the previous 250, 475, 700 damage. This is a ton of buffs. He'll stay in the B tier for now, but our analysts want more time to see just how these changes actually affect him. They might even be enough to push him into the S tier, but only time will tell. Alright, now let's run through our tier list for the junglers. We have Fiddlesticks reigning supreme in the S+ tier. He deals ridiculous amounts of AP, AoE damage, and can pull off some nasty ganks to demolish his competition. AP junglers are in high demand, and Fiddlesticks is easily the strongest one at the moment, although Echo, Evelynn, Elise, and Nidalee follow quite close behind him. Anyway, the reason for this is that AD mid laners are still ridiculously popular because of how aggressively they can play during the laning phase. Our S tier consists of Lee Sin, Olaf, Rek'Sai, Shaco, Trundle, Nunu, Elise, Warwick, Kayn, Evelynn, Nidalee, Wukong, Zac, and Graves. Like we've mentioned before, this is a very hefty list of junglers, we know, but they all can carry in their own unique ways. There's a champion for everyone out there, so make sure to experiment and see what sorts of playstyles you enjoy. That covers the jungle changes. Next, let's talk about the mid lane. We have a ton of mid lane changes this patch, so let's begin with the one we mentioned earlier in this video. Akali has needed buffs for a while now, as much as most players hate to admit. She's gotten another buff, but in the balanced team's defense, she has been underperforming significantly. Akali's Q damage has gone up from 25 to 125 plus 65% total AD and 60% AP to 30 to 135 plus 65% total AD and 65% AP. Akali's most important ability has been buffed, and thus she'll be a stronger laner and duelist. The 5 extra base damage should help her trade and clear waves, and the extra 5% AP scaling will help her win those all too important duels in the later parts of the game. Thus, Akali is being moved into the C tier for this patch. Brand in the mid lane specifically has also been buffed. Haven't heard about Brand mid in a while, have you? Same here, guys, honestly. Brand will now gain even more mana when killing an Ablaze unit. This is a nice little buff that'll help Brand players out when they can't secure a blue buff, whether it's because their jungler got counter jungled or because the jungler needs it. It's my buff. It's on my side. It's my jungle. Brand should be a little bit more self-sufficient than before. This buffs the jungle Brand and at times support Brand as well. But don't get any bright ideas, support players. Stealing farm is heavily frowned upon. Brand has been underperforming significantly as a mid laner, and these buffs are the first steps in him finding some success there. Our analysts don't believe this buff is enough to make him into a solid pick just yet, as his play rate was abysmally low. He wasn't even included in our tier list. Our analysts have placed him in the D tier for now, but we'll keep you guys updated on just how much these buffs do for him in our mid-patch update next week. Another mid-champion who got buffs was Viktor. His Q's auto-attack AP ratio was increased from 55 to 60%, the shield from 15 to 20%, and the empowered shield from 24 to 32%. This is a nice buff that will allow Viktor to become an even scarier late-game threat. For now, he'll remain in the B tier, however. It's not just all buffs, we've got nerfs too in the mid lane, starting with Yasuo. Yasuo's base health has been reduced from 523 to 490, while his passive shield health has been increased by 20 at all levels. In other words, it's going up from 110 to 510 to 130 to 530. Finally, his W's cooldown has gone up from 68 to 18 to 30 to 18. That wind wall nerf is massive, but the health nerf isn't that big of a deal, to be quite honest. Since wind wall is the ability that Yasuo players max last most of the time, this nerf is going to really hurt him. These nerfs won't affect his win rate very much in low elo, but definitely will in high elo. Players there are definitely better at playing around cooldowns and also around Yasuo's passive. While Yasuo's passive shield is stronger than before, there's always been counterplay to it. Ranged champions can activate the shield, then immediately back off, then proceed to zone Yasuo. The fact that Yasuo's wind wall cooldown has gone up means that it'll be much easier to play against Yasuo. Yasuo players won't be able to alternate between their shield and wind wall to secure farm as effectively as before, meaning that counter picks can shut him down even harder. Yasuo has been moved to the S tier as a result of this nerf. Hey, he got a week in the S+ tier. It's not bad by any means. Not a lot of champions get to say they've done that. Another mid lane champion who received a nerf was Cassiopeia. Her base HP was decreased from 575 to 560. Her base armor has gone down from 20 to 18, and her magic resistance has gone up from 30 to 34. Cassiopeia left little room to shut her down considering how potent her all-in potential is. Since her MR has actually increased, this should incentivize players to pick AD champions to counter her. 18 base armor is extremely low, and a single serrated Dirk purchase can put Cassiopeia players in a sticky situation. Alongside less base health, picking an AD assassin for instance should make it harder for Cassiopeia players everywhere on Summoner's Rift. But although these are nerfs, Cassiopeia will still remain in the S tier. Thus, our S+ tier consists of Fizz and Vladimir, while our S tier consists of Kassadin, Katarina, Echo, Cassiopeia, Diana, Zed, Silas, Galio, Talon, Annie, and Yasuo. Seriously guys, don't sleep on Galio and Annie. While they're simple, they deal ridiculous amounts of damage for how straightforward they are. They're just so powerful, and I've suggested them to many of my friends regardless of what rank they are. Also, I don't know if the Predator changes are going to make these much scarier to play in the mid lane, because then they like to roam to the sides and even come back to mid much faster. That covers the mid lane, so next up is the bottom lane. Hear this guys, we finally got those nerfs. Varus is finally nerfed. Varus was just way too much for players to deal with. His AD per level has gone down from 3.11 to 3, and his Q's AD ratio from 1.1 to 1.65 at max charge to 1 to 1.5 at max charge. Those fully charged Q's are going to still hurt, but at least they'll hurt a lot less. With both his Q and his attack damage going down, the Poke Varus build will be weaker than before, but still a relevant one. As a result, our analysts have bumped Varus down a mini tier from the S+ tier to the S tier. Next, Senna got buffed. This buff is intended to only affect AD Senna though, not support. At the end of the day, it'll be a minor buff to support Senna, and there's not really anything Riot can do about that. Senna's soul drop rate upon killing a unit has gone up from 2 to 8.33%, 8.33. Repeating, of course. Also, her attack speed ratio has gone up from 0.2 to 0.35. This attack speed buff especially is pretty massive. Senna has been known for her discouragingly low attack speed. This buff will almost certainly open up some more build paths for her, and of course, also increase her DPS. Senna will remain an A tier pick for the moment, as a lot of her strengths lie in the fact that she can funnel farm into her lane partner, while still performing exceptionally well as a marksman. Ziya has needed a buff too, and she's finally gotten it. Her ultimate's base damage was increased from 100 to 200 to 125 to 375. Her level 3 ultimate was very underwhelming. People want ultimate abilities that pop their opponent, and Ziya's just wasn't cutting it. While the power of Ziya's ultimate lies in its utility, it just wasn't doing enough damage, and this buff should help even the playing field for Ziya players in the late game. Ziya will remain in the B tier for now, but we'll have to see if this buff causes a surge in her play rate. In our S+ tier for the bottom lane, we have Ezreal and Kai'Sa, while our S tier consists of Vayne, Caitlyn, Jinx, Draven, Misfortune, Jhin, and now Varus. Yasuo has been moved down to the A tier as the changes this patch shifted more of his power into his shield. Ranged champions who happen to flood the bottom lane champion pool have a much easier time activating Yasuo's shield, and thus Yasuo is left much squishier than before versus them. He'll have a slightly harder time winning his fights. You don't bring a sword to a gunfight, and it's probably still not wise to use one against a bow and arrow after all. That covers the bottom lane, so let's wrap things up with supports. With no support changes this patch, our bottom lane tier list remains completely untouched. Yeah, it just be like that sometimes, and I really do hate to leave you support players out there dry. Those brand buffs honestly won't help out support brand in any significant way, in the same way that the Fiddlesticks nerfs aren't really going to do anything about his power as a support either. It just wouldn't be fair to not talk about anything here though, so our analysts have left us with a few key things to watch out for this patch. First though, let's run through our S+ and S tiers. Our S+ tier consists of Leona, Blitzcrank, Senna, and Soraka, while our S tier has Thresh, Nautilus, Morgana, Lulu, Bard, Nami, Yuumi, and Janna. Yuumi's win rate is extremely close to the 50% mark. Extremely worrying to be honest, unless you're playing her, in which case that's great for you. In Platinum and higher, her ban rate ended last patch at an astonishing 55%, while across all ranks it was at 35%. Our analysts say this objectively, not paying attention to any bandwagons. It's okay to ban her. Whether you hate her or think she's OP, Yuumi is a champion who's absolutely worth a ban. It's too easy for Yuumi to provide value to her team. Sure, getting caught out by a single crowd control ability spells certain death, but in most cases, Yuumi players should have a rather easy time avoiding this sticky situation. Next, if you're playing an aggressive support, make sure that you're roaming. Give Predator a try, especially on Blitzcrank. This keystone will definitely make roams much more potent than before, and you shouldn't sleep on it. Anywhere from gold and below, our analysts believe that players simply aren't roaming enough. You're a support player, not a bot laner. You don't always have to stay there, especially if your teammate is underperforming. If your mid or top laner is getting camped, maybe you should go and help them out. League of Legends is becoming more and more of a team-focused game, and especially for supports who have considerably less agency over their games than other roles. It's important to make sure that as many teammates as possible are in position to carry games. That's going to wrap up our changes for patch 10.12. Thanks again for watching, and make sure to check out ProGuides.com as we have a bunch of resources aimed at helping you guys improve. We're always updating our content there as well as here on our YouTube channel, so make sure to connect with us by subscribing. Until next time though, I wish you guys all the best of luck on Summoner's Rift.